Well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Power of Eight. Hello, my name is Pollyanna Blanco, and I'll be your co host along with Jennifer Smith. And today we're going to be talking about Chapter 11, which is called Group Revision. And it's a really interesting chapter because it's looking at the power of community, the power of group, and how healing it is. And I'm really curious, Jennifer, to hear what stood out for you in this chapter because there's so much in it. What stood out for you in it? What grabbed your attention?
She Lynn was trying to understand why the power of eight, the people who are sending the intentions, why they too got such a healing effect from it because they were sending the intentions. So, she reached out and mentioned many different ways that this could happen. She talked about different rituals, and she talked about how some of these spiritual um, rituals could, change your emotion, self-awareness, and the sense of oneself. And I'm reading this from the book on page 108 at the top. In one's capacities among those taking part, and also bring about improvements in neurobiological mechanisms such as neurotransmitters and immune markers. And I see a lot of different healing modalities that work in that way. I think the one thing that stuck out to me was talking about the rituals. And she said that wasn't really part of the power of eight because there wasn't any long, drawn out ritual. It was just people coming together and sending that healing intention. So it was a little bit different of why they received what they did. And I would agree with that because I've been in situations where I have received some of that healing power also because I was sending the healing intention. And it wasn't a long drawn out ritual. It was in fact you and I participated in one when we were in Mexico. And
Yes.
there wasn't any music. It was 20 people coming together. We held hands in a circle. We had intentions and we simply were just being. We were just had our mind clear, we were present, and we were just being. That's it, and that was powerful. That was so powerful.
Yes. Yes, I love that you shared that because
Yeah.
it's true. There's this sort of more conventional, like mystical experience that's guided through a ritual, like or a shamanic ritual or something that has some sort of authority figure. And like you were just sharing, when we gathered together, there was no hierarchy. There was just this intention to be a clear channel. It was actually a very selfless act, and she talks about that in here,
Mhm.
which I love that discernment that she makes because there's no sort of guru and everyone's sort of like aspire like it's aspiring to be like that guru. It's just we're just everything we need is here now, and we are honoring that by our presence, our sincerity, love, and presence. And now this chapter, as I got into it, had so many. The way she built it up, she talked about the different people from Durkheim to Maslow and all of these other people because she loves to do her research. And I like it was kind of interesting too how she even mentioned this people coming together in places where um, you know they actually there was a lot of wellness in places where there was even like poverty or poor sanitation, or she even used the example of Woodstock and how considering there was how it actually boosts our immune system. So it's like even with less than ideal physical environmental conditions, when our internal environment is aligned and is sparkling, with like clear high intention, that is very impactful. And even this idea too of the selflessness of it was another part that stood out for me because it's this. She talked about how the kind of common thread through for a number of different people whose theories she had read as she was trying to understand how the power of eight groups were so um, impactful. She acknowledged that there's this common thread that when we gather in community and we hold that sacred intention, that it's the sense of belonging to something larger than our individual self that is so key. And I just found that that was a beautiful reminder of how simple it can be. Like it can be more elaborate, and that's beautiful too. And at the same time, it can be incredibly simple in that it's accessible to anyone, anywhere, at any time. You don't need to have special skills or training, although all of those things are lovely expansions and expressions too. I just feel like this chapter holds so much potential for anyone reading it as a reminder that right now, right here in this moment, you can do something. You can embody something. You can send that energy out. And I know when we talk about these chapters now, we're talking about more and linking this back to, both about we've been experiencing in our everyday lives. What have you been noticing lately connected to this idea of the power of community? And
what have you been noticing lately? Well, connecting with people, connecting with people who are doing things similar to what we're doing here, kind of moving forward, sharing what we know, trying to help people understand it. That's always a connection with people. That's higher. It's a high, you can feel the vibration of it. You can feel the energy. Like even right now, I can feel it. I can feel it in my heart area out. That's what I feel right now.
yes.
That's what I feel whenever I connect with people who are doing things for the right reasons. There's no motive behind it other than sharing.
Yeah, I like how you express that. And I feel the same thing too. I always feel energized after I get off of these conversations with you. And we really appreciate too, we've had people on, commenting in the chat, and we'll check that again today. Please, we encourage you to share during these conversations, what you've been noticing. What have you been noticing in your own life? One of the things she mentions in here, it's community is so important, that mental health and well-being, which is a going experience on the earth right now, is the importance of not feeling isolated, right? The importance of feeling a sense of connection and purpose and belonging, how essential these are to our immune system function, to our digestion, to our just capacity to feel joy and to feel good about our place in the world. And one of the biggest sources, I think, of suffering and struggle for people is not having a sense of a place in the world. And so this is where a Power of Eight group gathering is such a beautiful way to bring people together and open to that mystical brain that we were talking about last week, right? you know and when I think about it myself, this past week, like, and just in general in my life, it's the moments of connection in my life with people, regardless of the outer material world, that are the moments that I'm going to carry forward on a soul level, on a heart level in my life. And it's not even about what we're doing, it's about how connected we feel. And it could be like this call that we're doing right now. It could be just hanging around with someone, being in their presence and feeling that it's both people mutually want to be just sharing time together. It's sometimes not even in the words itself, it's just in the presence. And so because you made it. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
You had mentioned a couple key words that got to me. One was joy. And I think it's finding that joy. And it doesn't have to be finding a person's joy can be many different things. It doesn't mean you have to be part of a community. It doesn't mean you have to be part of something. It's just, I had met with a nurse. She was a nurse because she was wanting to learn more about energy healing, because that would be a wonderful bridge. Nurses care for everyone, and if they could bring that energy healing together and integrate that, wow, that could really, really help people heal much, much quicker. But I just had a conversation with her, mainly a friend. wanted to meet and talk to one another. There was no main subject. We just went to a coffee shop and talked. But that was one of the things we talked about is joy. How do you find your joy? And sometimes people say, well, I don't know what my joy is. So it reminded me of that conversation because it can be the simplest of things. And I try to find things that just if I'm by myself, what makes me feel good? So it can be very, very simple things. Um, it doesn't have to be like real elaborate. I just wanted to point that out because I think sometimes people think that, well, I don't have a community to go to. Well, it's not that. It's just finding your joy, connecting with people, having a conversation that makes you feel good, giving someone a smile. It's simple things like that that really starts this good energy. Just add value to other people.
And you know what? And you're right. And I'm going to circle back to what you first said, because it starts with also being able to have that connection with ourselves, to be able to enjoy our own company. Like, there have been times in my life where I've had to say to myself, if I had a little bit of an emotional wobble, for whatever reason, in moments where I was alone, and I'd say to myself, I am not the booby prize. Like, I'm not the booby prize. I get to spend time with myself, and then I'll have time with other people too. But this is like, no FOMO here, no fear of missing out on anything. Like, I don't want to miss out on this time to connect with myself. And because then when I have that capacity to have a sort of a strengthen that sense of who I am from within, in terms of a deeper intimacy with myself, I then it's easier to just show up and be myself in the world without being caught up in as much in, what does someone think of me? What does someone need from me? Just to be myself, because we were talking about that too, just being that presence, right? So in order to be that presence, a big part of my own sacred self-care is taking the time every morning to connect with the divine, feel that connection to my heart center, make sure I'm not too much in my head, make sure I get grounded into my body, spend some time in nature, and just notice who's doing the noticing, even of every little small thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's those moments of just tuning in and checking in with myself throughout the day that actually makes me more available for life and for, adding value to people's lives. So it's this ebb and flow, right? I've noticed.
It is. And that's important to have that connection to be good by yourself, with yourself. And this question comes up a lot to me when people are going through this spiritual awakening and they say, I used to be out and doing all these things and being so active, and now I'm like by myself, like, is that okay? And I'm okay with it. Is that okay? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, that's some of the stages you go through. You kind of draw back from some of all the busyness, and then that's a time to dive deeper into who you are.
Mhm.
And that's okay, and that's good because you're finding that connection. And then I think eventually you pick up from there, and then you add things back on that you enjoy, and um, life becomes, I don't know, it's different. It's really hard to explain. That's the
I
best
know,
way I can explain it.
and I know, yeah, I totally get it. I know what you're talking about. It's sort of like cycles, right? It's not a line. Like, I think a
Mhm.
lot in the past, a lot of us have been programmed that it's somehow linear, but it's cycles, right? It's like seasons, right?
Mhm.
There's winter where we need to just be in retreat a little bit. Like, I have a hermit side to me. I like my woman cave.
Mhm.
I need it. And I realize sometimes there's the habit of, this habitual response of being in go mode, especially during the year when I'm teaching high school, that it's my life is so scheduled. In the summers when I'm off, it takes me a while to unwind from that habit of the habit, right? Of, that even if I want to, it's like there are parts of me that really resist it. And then by the time I've fully unwound, it's like I want to continue this flow and bring it into the coming year, in terms of how I maybe shift how I do things out there, or discern more where I place my energy. And so it's almost like as we move through that sort of cyclical process, we keep expanding through it too. So it's, you know, winter, spring, new possibilities, summer, the harvest, and and then fall, things are starting to need to kind of go back to decomposition and into
Yeah.
rest. So
And I think that's part of the growth cycle, because we're continuing, it's an upward spiral, right? So we grow, and sometimes we can just stay there for a little bit. And I think that's why all these seasons, how you've explained them, come about, is because we're constantly growing and evolving.
yes, and I feel like when we honor that, it is an upward spiral, and the opposite would be to just be on autopilot, right? And that would be a very different spiral, be more of a downward spiral. And this is where I feel like sometimes it's important to acknowledge what you were mentioning, like that there is a time for going inside of ourselves and to not judge ourselves for it. Like that
Mhm.
question, is it okay that I'm doing this?
Mhm.
Well, does it bring you joy? Does it help you to feel more connected to yourself? There's no right or wrong here. It's just the motivation maybe underneath the desire to do it. Like if it's a desire, and retreat is there's a space for everything, to feel everything. Just a question of, is it ultimately helping me to expand and feel more connected, or is it leaving me with a sense of isolation and separateness and
Mhm.
fear, even, or doubt or hesitancy? Then these the sort of reflective questions to muse on and to get more clarity about, if it's a healthier, you know, uh,
Mhm.
cycle, or that's expanding ultimately, I feel. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good. Was there anything else from the chapter that you wanted to mention?
Yeah, I've got so many, got so many
Oh, do
pages
you? Okay, go ahead. We'll talk
folded and
about
stuff
them.
here. I'm just trying to discern which are the most important. It actually turned out to be a really great chapter, and I guess I feel like the part that I really feel like I maybe want to just share a little bit about is when she talks about revision and maybe what that is, because I know during a few years back I was doing a training where literally you can go back and kind of rewrite your timeline. So that word revision has that, nuance for me, where you can do sort of a guided visualization of something that's happened and then go back and revisit it, but from a different experience. And it was interesting because as I got to the end of the chapter, I was asking myself, okay, this is what she means by group revision. So she references, I'm just going to read it here. Perhaps the key to the healing effect was indeed the sense of trust. James W. Pennebaker, chairman of the Department of Psychology at the University of Texas, has spent more than 3 decades studying the power of trusting others. I thought that was really interesting. His research reveals the power of opening up. People who can trust others enough to be vulnerable enjoy improvements in immune system function, autonomic nervous system activity, and psychological well being, and fewer visits to the doctor. I witnessed this especially in our Power of Eight circles, where participants revealed intimate details of their health issue to one another. Daniel described what happened with his spine, Rosa her struggles with her thyroid. In that circumstance, both the discloser and the recipient of someone's secret life require a level of trust that in itself can prove healing. Penbaker has also studied the social dynamics of opening up and sees it as the primary driver in therapy, perhaps even the primary driver in prayer circles. Disclosure is all about telling someone our story. So perhaps that group process of revision, the idea that you could rewrite a life story or even the story of a wounded country, proves healing to everyone, both the protagonist and those with the pencil in their hands. So I really like that, because
Me
oftentimes
too.
when we keep those tender spots, those struggles locked behind a closed door tightly because we want to present a brave face to the world, we do
Mhm.
suffer in that isolation. And when we can step forward and be met in a safe place with someone who only has the highest intentions, at heart for us, then something miraculous begins to happen. Our whole relationship to that story, to that experience, even maybe we pathologized it, starts to begin to open up through that beauty of trust. And then we're able to, through the sharing of it, the disclosure of it, open to a new experience of being with it in the presence of others. And that is, it shifts the way even the mind of form talks to us about it, right? Instead of it's like, oh, why did this happen to me? There's an opening, a possibility of this is happening for me, or this is even ultimately happening through me, because there's a give and take in the power of eight groups. So I love that is transformational. It's a transformation.
Yeah. I love how you described it. I think of the word trust and think about just in the healing room where we talked about in earlier episodes where we ask the recipient of the healing, like, what is your sacred intention? Because that brings that to the top. So we know what is to be healed in the healing room that day. And I think that's part of the trust. People come to safe spaces so they can get the healing, and they have a trust in the person that they're with to be able to say that, knowing that, everyone's in that space for the right reasons, just to heal. And in the same way with the power of eight, it makes so much sense to me because you've got to get that out. You got to be vulnerable, get it out on the table of what you want, and lay that in trust and amongst everyone, and trust that for it to be healed. Like it has to be opened up, and then you heal it. And I think we do a lot of this work on our own too. I know that I did in the beginning when it was just me. Really by journaling, by really being truthful with yourself on things that need to be healed, because there's so many life scripts that are running in our heads, and getting that out and healing it, getting it out and healing it. And then with group healing, there's a lot more that can be healed.
Yes, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, I was even doing a case study this week for a new sort of little add-in to a modality, and it's that power of trust for people to feel safe, when you're working with them, to really invite them into a space that's what makes it sacred, right? Is that trust. And if you think about our modern world with so many things moving so quickly, and people sort of maybe getting into that habit of being on autopilot, and sort of automatic responses, like even someone saying, how are you doing? I'm fine. And it's just all these social protocols, but there's no connection. It's like, it's no wonder that one of the biggest healers is trust, right? That we have safe spaces where, and I know even when I've been on the healing table and I've been a receiver of it, it's something that is so restorative to actually be in the presence of someone where you can completely relax your nervous system, completely surrender, any need to control the situation on any level, and just be open and be curious, and feel held and feel safe. I mean, that in itself there was something else in here she mentioned about healing, and I think it was a bit earlier on. I just feel like it's the perfect thing to just add in there. It was just, I don't know if I can find it again, but it was just about what actually is healing. But I mean, I think we both have a sense of, from our own experience, both offering healing and receiving healing, that it's something that she shared, but it was nicely said. But anyways, just that capacity, right? That capacity to be in a place, in a space where we are seen and heard without judgment.
Yeah, for sure. It's about 30 minutes in now, and I wanted to get a little bit into like, what are we noticing this week with the energies? What are we hearing people say? I think for me this week, it's been, it almost seems like we have to keep up with our light body expansion. We're expanding and then we got to keep up. So I've noticed like having to just slow down and like take a nap, you know? And then I've also heard people say that they're experiencing uh, like different things. Like they know that what something's coming by the way they're feeling, but it may come in a couple of days later. So it's like we talk about being multi-dimensional, and I think that's what they're experiencing is that multi-dimensional experience. And I tell people, the one thing that can really help with that is some of the quantum healing that we do, because that helps bring all your energy back to where it needs to be and balances all of the energy bodies. Are you hearing anything like that?
Yes, definitely the sleep piece. I feel like there's a lot of integration going on this week. It
Mhm.
feels like I've noticed that myself because this week I felt my body needing extra reassurance through rest to the point where it'll just take me down for a nap, whether it's the best moment or not. And at the same time that my body needs extra reassurance and rest, it's like there is a lightness of being inside of me too and a
Mhm.
clarity that I feel like this whole summer has been building up to it. And then with the Lion's Gate too, there's been a lot of purging. So there's been a lot of, when you talked about the light body lightening up and just creating more spaciousness within, simplifying, discerning, which it's getting easier, I'm finding, to discern which is
Mhm. I think so too.
which is and there's more neutrality. So it's things that once, I feel like there was sort of an old timeline that was starting to kind of phase out, and my body is reintegrating. And I think this is happening for, I've heard other people talk about this too, that we're all on a new timeline, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And to the degree
Mhm.
that we can begin to recognize and be curious and open to what that is like, it's like everything that maybe we've been meditating on or visualizing, accepting that it's here now, and noticing any parts of us that have been resistant to accepting that, because
Mhm.
that's where the pushback's going to come, physically or emotionally or spiritually or mentally. And so it's almost like we're in this transition period from an older version of ourselves that got us to this point into accepting we're actually on a new timeline.
Yeah.
And
What does
so
that look like to you? When we say a new timeline, what does that look like to you? How would
that's,
you describe that?
that's an interesting question. Well, it starts with gratitude, and actually, because there's the habit of the thinking of, you get sometimes with manifestation practices or whatever people want to call them, or co-creation practices, it can get so easy to get into the routine of constantly wishing. Not when I do mine, I don't wish for something, I always give thanks for already being here. Even
Mhm.
that is a habit, though, you know, to fully take a moment and really feel into, even more than I have already, that it's actually here, that it's actually here, to really open my eyes and notice and say, oh, this is exactly what I wanted it to feel like. It is actually here now.
It
But
is.
there's still this little tape in the back of my mind saying one day, one day. And it's like, no, no, it's here now. Say thank you. It's really literally here now. And so I'm getting a taste of it now. And so that's the piece of like, and I think it's also because what you mentioned earlier, the multidimensionality, right? Because we're able to see multiple timelines simultaneously, because we're
Mhm.
able to discern, if we have a flicker of a feeling, it leads us over here. If we go with this thought instead, it takes us over here. If we go with this memory and project it over here, we're going that way. It's like a lattice work. And so it's like,
That's why thinking is so important, because we have so many different potentialities, and it's like, what are we paying attention to? What are we trying to create in this world? And I loved how you were describing all of that, because that's what it's like. Like each decision has multiple potentialities, and you can change as you go along. You just plot your course.
yes. And at the same time too, like, thinking is really important because you want to have that clarity of thought. And at the same time, I think what can happen for people, they can get overwhelmed, right? Because there's so much stimulating us. I think that's what it is. Like
Mhm.
our nervous systems are shifting, our bodies, are shifting from carbon-based to crystalline-based, which means we conduct electricity differently, which means it's affecting our nervous systems.
Yeah.
And I've noticed, it's kind of funny, I can't tell, in all transparency, if it's the heat down here and I'm getting hot flushes again, because my hot flashes disappeared, back when I started a new protocol back in January, February, something like that. They disappeared. And they were fine in July, but I feel like because of the rapid acceleration of energy, my body, I notice that if I have even a glimmering of a thought that takes me out of joy or out of peace, it could be so subtle. It could be like, oh, it's just like a habitual kind of, my body starts in, like the sirens come on and it starts flat.
Yeah, you can feel it. You can feel all that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how we're built, that our body will signal exactly what our thoughts are.
Yes.
And it can tell us, it can lead us in a way. You started mentioning the hot flashes.
Yeah.
I noticed within the last week is like waking up and my hands and my feet just really being really, really, really hot. I don't know if you've experienced that before, but that's been on and off for me. But this week has been a lot like that.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like there's something happening for all of us to our physical bodies. We're getting upgrades, to our capacity as a sensing organism. We're able to sense more, and this has, goes. I mean, more conscious we are of it, the more we can, channel it and direct it. Even if, and this is where I think it's important to mention it, because if, say, someone's still pathologizing things or getting stuck in stories or fear or negativity about it, and then going into overthinking everything, I feel like everything is more sensitive now. Our emotions are more sensitive, our thoughts are more sensitive, our body is more sensitive, our spirit's more sensitive. And the key is to notice all of that. And at the same time, I always go back to who's noticing it. Like, because all of those things are actually coming online to help us navigate, co-create, innovate, you name it, with the source creative intelligence, moving through us. However, we can misunderstand it along the way. We can misinterpret it in the sense of thinking things are getting not better, right? The opposite, right? And so that's where I think it's so key to be gentle with ourselves and kind to ourselves, compassionate with ourselves, and give ourselves permission to integrate whatever we're noticing and just be, oh, this is interesting, without having a thing, just this too shall pass, right?
Yeah. Well, I wanted to mention one more thing before we go. On the timelines, I was thinking about this. What does that mean to me? Because I think even in the physical outer world, not just how we're feeling, I see the shift. So it takes me back to this song what my son played for me the other day, and I love it. But it says everything's the same, but yet it's different. Like every day is the same, but yet it's different. And that's sort of how I would explain it, is like, yeah, okay, everything is the same, when you look, but I can see positive shifts upward in the people around me and the things that are happening, so it's not like this, you wake up and, ooh, everything's different. It's the same, but yet it's different. It's like this positive shift upwards.
I love how you just explained that. You articulated that so well. I felt that as you were saying that, and you helped me to articulate something I have been noticing. I just didn't know how to express it. So that's exactly it. And it's kind of comical too, because a friend of mine's been saying, almost like I didn't realize how much I was saying it. It's like something different, something different, something different. And it's still the same, but it's different. And I know what you're saying. It's like I see the light expanding in a lot of people right now. It's been happening gradually, and that's what I mean. You can miss it. Like, you can keep kind of wishing for it or giving, living from the end as a practice, trusting it's here, but still there's a part of you thinking it's still over there, and it's actually here. So it's like, I love how you discern that. Yeah. Everything is the same and different at the same time. So I think that's a wonderful note to end on.
I do too. All right, so we have next week, we'll be on chapter 12. Oh, and this one is, the next chapter is holy water. So
Lovely.
great. So we will be back here next Wednesday at 5 p.m. and we will discuss chapter 12 and give you some updates of what happens over the next week. So thanks everyone for joining, and we will see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks, Pollyanna.
Thank
See you
you.
soon.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, everyone.